Scream 6 is a 2023 horror slasher film created by the same team behind Scream 5. So if you haven't checked out that review, do so now, if you dare. The crew behind Radio Silence is back yet again with another installment of the beloved Scream franchise. Following the self-nicknamed Core 4, the 4 characters that survived Scream 5, as they now reside in New York City and, yes, must face the Ghostface killer from the Stab movies yet again. As you may or may not know, I am a major fan of the Scream franchise. This is perhaps my favorite horror franchise of all time. And one of the reasons for that is that I think all of the movies in this franchise are pretty good. Some are great, and some are just good, but none of them are meh or bad. And that still rings true for Scream 6. I do think I have a lot more criticisms of Scream 6 than I do Scream 5, which I really loved. And don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed Scream 6, but I'm going to hop into some criticisms, as well as some praises, because the film has a lot to praise, as well as criticize, that I think will balance out my conflicting opinions on this movie. Scream 7 is greenlit, so if you want to hear my possible ideas for what I think the team of Radio Silence could do for Scream 7, make sure to check out that video as it drops on my channel probably later this week, because I just watched the movie for a second time. I wanted to get 2 viewings of this in before I actually gave a final verdict on it, and just because, you know, it's a mystery movie, and the first time you're trying to figure out the mystery and you want to give it some time to set in. Then you watch it having known who the killers are, which I'm not going to spoil right away, but I will mark a point where I'm going to dive into that, and then we can discuss the rest of the movie. But my overall opinions on Scream 6 were that it was a very solid movie, but it had a few lackluster elements. And if I had to sum it up very briefly, I think this is a very strong slasher movie, but meh, average to sub-average whodunit. Because the Scream franchise, unlike many of the classic slasher franchises, Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, this franchise is both in part a slasher and a whodunit. It's a mystery as well as a horror movie. I think the horror was really nailed in this movie, but the whodunit could have been a tad better, and I'll explain why really when I get to the killers, but also just in general. I feel like Scream 5 left us a lot of clues and hints throughout it. When you rewatch it, you kind of go, oh, I picked up on this, or this makes sense where this character is. There's a little bit of that in Scream 6, but largely it kind of is chalked up to coincidence of going, oh, certain characters know certain characters and therefore are able to get away with things pretty smoothly. And I guess they wrote themselves into a sweet spot with a certain character that is Ghostface, and their position makes it easy for them to, I don't know, change or tamper things. But at any rate, I do think it could have been a little bit more airtight, like I thought Scream 5 was, because I thought that was a really solid script. Scream 5's script was a lot more solid, although the movie was a lot more conservative and didn't take as many leaps. This movie, while it's a little bit more sloppy in the writing department in some regards, manages to go beyond what Scream 5 ever could. It gave us more thrills, more chills, more scenery, if you will, and I think that works in the movie's favor. This is, as many people are now realizing, perhaps the most brutal of the Ghostface killers. The movie is far more gory and bloody than the other ones. I wouldn't say it's like super gory, but it is pretty violent in terms of the stabbing. But then again, the film franchise in the film franchise is called Stab, so makes sense that there would probably be some stabbing going on. But yes, Ghostface is very violent in this movie. And also it lends itself to kind of a bigger, broader, I would say better, but I like Woodsboro, but a bigger and broader scenic area that is New York City. Now, one thing that I can kind of admit is that while it didn't necessarily make the movie any better or worse in my head, the fact that the movie took place in New York City wasn't very emphasized. There are some nods to Jason Takes Manhattan. There is a sequence on a subway, which was nice to see, and obviously there are high-rise buildings in the film. But there are no major New York City landmarks in the movie. No Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building, Times Square. And for a movie that the promotional material heavily placing it in New York City, you would think that there'd be a bit more of that touristy type stuff that we've come to expect with a lot of NYC horror movies. But it didn't take away anything for me. Same can be said for the Halloween element of the movie. The film does take place, I guess, on Halloween, but it's not really emphasized aside from some people wearing costumes. It's very glazed over. Again, doesn't make the movie better or worse, but it is an element in it, and I thought I would just kind of point out that doesn't really feel Halloween-y. There are no jack-o'-lanterns. There's not really kind of a fall vibe to it. There are no... It just doesn't feel like the atmosphere that you would expect around Halloween. As many fans were excited for, and including myself, Kirby was back, and that was a really nice sight to see. If you don't remember, Kirby is one of the very loose survivors from Scream 4, and a fan favorite. She really knew that horror trivia, and it came in handy and ultimately saved her life. And now she's back to dish it at us again, this time working for the FBI. In addition to her, we also get Gale Weathers returning. Not much in terms of Sydney, as we all knew. She wasn't going to be returning in this one. Neve Campbell had some monetary issues with the crew, so hopefully she can come back in the next one. I'll talk about that more in my Scream 7 prediction type video. But I don't think, like, her absence from this movie was a huge toll on it, because that core 4 group of characters, I think, is really strong. Each of these characters I found pretty likable and relatable, and they all are given little moments to shine throughout both Scream 5 and Scream 6. And really that core bond between those 4 characters and having each of them given a moment to shine, I think really solidified this movie as being solid, whereas it could just be schlocky slasher nonsense. Obviously, the Radio Silence crew knew how to elevate those characters. However, as I mentioned before, some of the mystery elements get a little bit lost in the scuffle. We do get introduced to a couple of new characters. No one really to write home about necessarily, aside from, you know, kind of some typical characters we'd expect to see in the Scream franchise, kind of the love interest, or the roommate, or just different characters we've seen in different capacities. Scream 6 very much serves as a nice counterbalance to Scream 2, like Scream 5 was kind of similar to Scream 1 in many regards. It takes place in a bigger setting, kind of with a school emphasis, and the killer motives, which I'll get to in a bit, they do have some connections to Scream 2. I do like that a lot of the kill sequences were very dynamic. They brought back the chase sequences that a lot of Scream fans were longing for in Scream 5. And I do think some of the kills were quite brutal and interesting. There's a particular one involving a ladder going across 2 windows that I thought was very effective, and if you're kind of skeeved out by heights, you might get a little unnerved by it. There's also that sequence from the gas station that we saw in a lot of the trailers, and I thought Ghostface with a shotgun sounded too good to be true, but it actually turned out pretty good in the movie, and I like that sequence overall. I also really love, and perhaps one of my favorite things about Scream 6, like with all the Scream movies, is I always love a good opening. And Scream 6 perhaps has one of the best in the franchise because it takes everything we've come to expect and really flip it on its head. I really like how that was portrayed. Some people may not be a big fan of it, but for everything that's unveiled, I think it made a lot of sense. Overall, I would give Scream 6. Let's give it, as of now, a 3.5 out of 5. I would give Scream 5 probably a 4 out of 5, so I would take it down a half step from Scream 5. It was a little more sloppy, but a little more energetic, so there's a good balance there. I'd say they're very similar to being on par. Like I said, I like all of the Scream movies, but as it stands, if I had to do a little quick ranking now, I'll do an official one probably after Scream 7. But I'd say Scream 3 is the lowest. I still like that movie, but it's got a lot of problems with the script. But nevertheless, Scream 3, Scream 6, Scream 4, Scream 5, Scream 2, and of course, the original Scream. All that said, I'm going to jump into the spoiler talk now. If you want to hear my thoughts on what I think could happen in Scream 7, stay tuned because they will be coming soon in my upcoming podcast. But let's talk about those spoilers. So, you remember how I said that Scream 2 and 6 kind of parallel one another? Well, you remember in Scream 2 that the killers are revealed to be Mickey, the film student character, friend of a lot of the other characters like Sidney in Scream 2. And then the other killer is revealed to be Nancy Loomis, Mrs. Loomis, Billy's mother, the killer from the first movie's mom. Well, very similarly, the killers in this movie, again, spoiler warning, are revealed to be the family of Richie, the killer from Scream 5, which both correlate to a family member, a parent figure, if you will, that acts as one killer, technically, and then two other characters, the two friends, the roommates of our core 4 characters, that serve as kind of the friend group in type characters. So there are technically 3 ghost faces in Scream 6. I really liked the... I don't remember all of the names off the top of my head, so I'm just going off of their relationships to the other characters. But Cop Dad, as I'll call him, I quite liked Cop Dad as Ghostface. I thought his performance was very well done. He had that kind of maniacal, crazed aspect about him that reminded me of Mrs. Loomis, and I thought it was pretty good. The other 2 characters, the younger characters, I don't know. I still have to sit with them. I mean, they serve their purpose, right? They serve their purpose in the story, but they didn't really stick with me. The girl barely had any screen time, like 3 minutes before she died, and then came back, and then died. And then the other guy, he had a couple of little things. The guy who I think was an Avatar, he had a couple of moments to kind of get his character across, but again, they're not really in it a ton. And that's kind of unfortunate because you want to understand where the killer could potentially be at any given time, and because there are 3 of them, you're trying to keep track of all 3 once you see the movie again, and it kind of gets a little fuzzy. They explain, like, that the girl was trying to attack Mindy on the subway, and that she attacked Gail, which, first of all, look, I know that Ghostface is always played by a third-party actor, so it doesn't give away the mystery. Understandable. But really, Gail's boyfriend was like this huge guy. And you're telling me this little redhead girl was able to take him down and throw him through a glass window? It's the same problem a lot of people have with Dewey, with Mindy, and I kind of agree. At least switch them around to make these bigger, heavy hitter characters the ones that take out these other big heavy hitter characters. Unless someone else is lurking behind the scenes. I don't know. I'll save that for the Scream 7 discussion. Nevertheless, I think that the dad cop character was a strong killer. I thought that the other 2 served their function, but they weren't as memorable in the rogues gallery of the Scream franchise. I do think that the motive was passable, fine. it worked. It paralleled Scream 2, so any gripes I could have with it, I'd also have to have a gripe with Scream 2, and I love Scream 2, so I won't give too many, you know, too many tisks to. But, I don't know. It was a fine whodunit. It wasn't an amazing whodunit. There weren't enough breadcrumbs to connect the dots. It just kind of seemed like intense gory kill, well done slasher movie, and then there's a killer reveal because we have to have this killer reveal, and it's fine. I almost thought that the introduction of when Ghostface, the film student who ends up dying in the opening scene, kills the teacher for the opening kill, and then takes his mask off, I found that to be more of a surprise than the actual reveal at the end. And that's fine. It's nice to get a subversion of expectations from the Scream franchise, because I wasn't really seeing that coming. I figured they could have done that in the realm of possibilities, but I thought it was well done. But in the sense of, you know, just kind of disappointing with building up this grandiose killer. You know, you had the old masks from all the other killers, and you had this killer saying, like, to Gale, like, oh, we've never spoken before, or building up this grandiose killer to be this person that we'd really know, and or in the trailers it's like, I'm different, I'm better than all these ghost faces or whatever. It's just another revenge plot. It's not bad, but if you're really hyping it up to get people's butts in the seats, then you really want that punchline to be met, and to me it worked, but it wasn't as grandiose as I was expecting. But there you have it, my entire thoughts on Scream 6. A really solid horror film, a great slasher, yet another great installment into the Scream franchise. Could it have been better? Yeah. Could it have been worse? Oh, absolutely. I thought it was a really well done movie. The Radio Silence team knows how to make a solid movie with interesting, likable characters, good suspense sequences, and a fair enough mystery. I hope that Scream 7 will hopefully be the last chapter, at least for a little bit. I don't want to get Scream fatigue because I do love this franchise and I'd hate to see it get flushed down the toilet. So stop it while it's going strong and then bring it back maybe in like 5 to 10 years. But there you go. Those are my thoughts on Scream 6. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And remember, for all things Halloween, this is Hauntformer.